Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Weekly Coder. I'm Chris, and we are going to continue on from our Pac-Man clone tutorial. We last week did the Pac-Man death animation, and this week we are going to add in some UI elements. Up until now, it's been pretty much just game mechanics, but now we've got to pretty up the game a little bit, because right now we just got the first level. It starts, Pac-Man goes around the board, the ghosts try to chase him, all that stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a main menu, okay? So that before the game starts, the menu will load, and then from there you can start the game. And then when the game starts, we'll have a little player ready text that comes up, and then Pac-Man will actually be able to start after a predetermined amount of time. And we're also going to add the intro song. So a couple of things we're going to do here. First, we are going to add some files that we need. And it's going to be a graphic, it's going to be a sound file, and a font. So one of those we don't have a folder for yet, and that is the font. So we're going to create a folder in our assets, and we're going to call it fonts. And then I'm going to drag in this font here, and I'll make these assets available for download. So this font here, this is going to drag it in. And that's called press start 2p.ttf, and that's the one we're going to use. And we're going to drag the Pac-Man intro sound into our sounds folder. And then we're going to drag the Pac-Man title.png into our graphics folder. Okay? And just so that we don't forget, let's go ahead and go into our graphics folder, click on Pac-Man title, and we're going to change the filter mode to point. And we're going to change the pixels per unit to 1. Okay? So the next thing we need to do is we need to go to our game object. And you see here where we've got our background audio playing, and it plays on awake. So the first thing we want to play when our game starts is our intro sound instead. So we're going to go to sounds, and we're going to drag the Pac-Man intro sound over here to our audio clip property, okay? So now when we play the game, we get this intro sound that we need to hear, okay? But things are not quite right, because the intro sound's supposed to play after you're in the menu, you press the play button, and then you get to the board, then you start the game intro. The game intro plays. When the game intro is finished playing, then the game can start playing, okay? So that's what we need to do. We need to actually create a new scene. So we're just going to go to File, New Scene, and we're going to save our current scene, okay? And then we're going to save this new scene, so File, Save Scene As, and we're going to make sure that we're in the Scenes folder, and we're going to save it as Game Menu. Alright, so then we've got this scene here with a camera, and it's pretty much blank. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to create a canvas UI object, or game object. So we go up to Game Object, and we go down to UI, and then we go down to Canvas, and it'll create a canvas for us, okay? Now we'll have to zoom out a little bit to actually be able to see the whole canvas. Alright, so there we go. That's our entire canvas that we're going to work with. So there are a couple of properties that we're going to adjust here. First, we're going to adjust our scaling mode. And right now it's set to constant pixel size, which is by default. We want our fonts and all of our other elements to be able to scale with the screen size. So the scaling mode we're going to change to scale the screen size. And then it's asking us for a reference resolution. And 800 by 600 is fine, but I like to go with 1024 by 768. And 1024 by 768 is a 4:3 ratio resolution. And what I mean by that is if we go over to our camera, and you'll look here, right now we're set on standalone 1024 by 768, but we can set this to 4:3, okay? And then anytime, any resolution device that we play our game on, whether it's 1920 by 1080 or 4K TV or whatever, the size is going to be set to 4:3 which is the size of a regular one of those old school TVs. And what'll happen is that if it's like a 1920 by 10 or 1080, which is 1080p, we'll see black bars on the sides, but we'll still get that, you know, square effect that we get from you know, those old school TVs. So we'll keep that at 4:3. We'll keep our canvas reference resolution set to 1024 by 768. So now that we've got our blank canvas, we can start to add UI elements to it. And what we're going to need first is we're going to need the title image. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go to Game Object UI, and we're going to select Image. Okay, that's going to just put a blank square image for us to work with in our UI. And the properties that we have here are like we can add a source sprite. Okay, so we're going to click on the round button here, and we're going to select our Pac-Man title. And that looks pretty horrible right now. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we check the box here that says Preserve Aspect. Okay, so now that we've got the Preserve Aspect box checked, we've got our title, and it's got the appropriate proportions. So now what we need to do is we need to just change the width and height of our title. Okay, so I'm going to go with 1500 for the width, and then like, what did I have? 170 for the height. And then I had 0 and 210. So we've got position X at 0 and Y we're going to put at 210. Alright, so that's going to be our title image. Another thing that we should do real quick is we should go to the main camera and we should change our background color. Because if we go to the game view right now, our background color is blue. We want to go with black. So that's done in the main camera. In the background color property, you just click that and drag this down to the black. Alright, so now if we go to game, we'll have that nice black background like we have in the original Pac-Man game. So, back in our scene view, we'll have to add 3 more elements, and they're going to be text elements. And what we're going to do is Game Object UI Text, and right here's our text. Alright, so for our text, we've got a font. We've got a property here called font that we can use to change the font. So we can just click on this button here, and we're going to select the font that we imported, the Press Start 2P. Alright, and that's going to give us that nice pixelated font that we're looking for. For the font size, we're going to go with 29. And then we're going to need to change the width. We're going to change that to 300. And we're going to change the height to 35. Alright, and as far as the other properties go, we're going to choose, for this one, we're going to go with center and center. And we're going to change the text to 1 player. And what else? We need to change the color to white. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and set the position of this to 0 and 37. Okay. And then we're going to create another one for 2 player. So we're going to duplicate this. All right. We're going to say, we're just going to select it and press Command D. And then we're going to drag it down. And the Y position for this is going to be -18. And we're going to change the text to be 2 players. We're going to change the alignment to be left aligned. And then we're just going to move this over to the right. Okay, and the X position for that is actually going to be 36. Okay, that lines up nicely with the top one. So now the last one that we've got to do is we've got to create the little chevron that you basically move up and down between 1 player and 2 players. So we're going to duplicate this text one more time. And we're going to move it down a little bit just so that we can see. And we're going to create this chevron. Okay, that's just the greater than sign. We are going to, let's see, let's make that, what did I have? Width, I had 50. The height can stay the same. And then the X position for that is going to be -150. and the Y position is going to be 37. Okay. Notice how the Y position for this and this are the same, because in a minute we're going to do a little bit of code that's going to allow us to move this chevron based on first and second player. Okay. So let's go ahead and name these so that we know what they are. And this one's going to be one player text. This one's going to be two player text. And this one's going to be player selector. Alright. So, now that we've got that, if we press play, we'll see what it looks like in the in play mode. Okay, pretty cool so far. All right. So, how do we tie all this together? Well, we're gonna create a script. So we're gonna go to scripts folder. We're gonna create a game menu script. C#. Game menu. And then we're gonna go back over here into our hierarchy, and we're gonna right-click and do create empty. We're gonna rename this game object to game menu script, and then we're going to drag our game menu script that we just created onto the inspector. Okay, so now it's a component of our game menu script game object. So now we need to do some code. So let's do that. We're gonna go into our game menu script. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and close these other ones. Alright, so the first thing we need to do is we need to import the namespace that we're going to use. So we're going to use Unity Engine .ui, which is going to allow us to use the classes in that UI namespace. So the classes that we need to deal with are the one player text, two player text, and player selector. And then we also need to create a boolean. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create our boolean. So public boolean, and we're going to call it is one player game. And we're going to set that to true. Okay. And then we're going to create our other variables, and those are going to be text type. So we're going to we don't need them to be public, we can do private text one, we can't do it that one, player text 1, and private text player text 2, and private text player selector. Alright, so we're not going to need the start method, so we can get rid of that. The update method is basically going to serve as our loop in the game menu to determine what buttons were pressed. And the buttons that we care about are the up arrow, the down arrow, and the return button. So what we're going to do is we're going to put some logic here. We're going to say if input.getKeyUp keycode up arrow else if input.getKeyUp keycode.down arrow else if input.getKeyUp keycode.enter or return. There we go. Alright, so now that we've got those, we can add some logic here. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check to see if someone's pressing the up arrow. So if the player is pressing the up arrow, we want to check to see if is one player game is currently true. Okay, so if not is one player game, that means that that means that we're not wanting to play a one player game, we want to play a two player game. Then we set is one player game equal to true, Okay. And the same thing here with the down arrow. We're going to say if is one player game, then is one player game equals false. And then in our return method, or return logic for our, for when we press the return button, okay, what we want to do is we just want to load the level. So we also need to import another namespace, and that is the scene manager namespace. So using Unity engine dot scene management. So now we can use scene manager in here, scene manager dot load scene, and it just takes the scene name. So our scene name is level 1, and that's how we're going to load our scene. So what we need to do now is we need to add some more logic here, because we want to move the chevron, the selector, when we press the up and down arrow. So obviously, if it's not a one-player game, then the chevron should be at the two-player game selection, and we want to move it to the one-player game selection. So that's easy enough. So we just go player selector dot transform dot local position equals new vector 3, and we're going to pass in player selector dot transform dot local position dot x, because our x isn't going to change. And then we're going to pass in player text 1 dot transform dot local position dot y, and player selector dot transform dot local position dot z, because the z isn't changing. Okay, so we're only updating the y position, and we're updating it to the position of player player 1 game. Okay, same thing here. Player selector dot transform dot local position equals new vector 3. Player selector dot transform dot local position dot x. Player text 2 dot transform dot local position dot y, and player selector dot transform dot local position dot z. Okay, so that'll move our chevron back and forth. So let's save that and go back into Unity. And there's one more thing we've got to do in order to use these both of these scenes, is we have to add them to our build project. All right, so we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to Build Settings, and right here we've got no scenes to build. So what we need to do is we need to drag our scenes into here. All right, so we're going to go to our scenes, and we're going to drag in Game Menu and Level 1. And the other thing about the scenes are we've got indexes, okay, 0 and 1, and these are the indexes in which they load in. So first is going to go Game Menu and then Level 1. You can also use these index numbers to load scenes instead of using the names, right? So whatever scene is first at index 0 is going to be the one that loads when the game starts. Now that's not in Unity. When we have it, like if we had level 1 loaded right now and press the play button, it would load level 1 because that's the scene we're in. If we had game menu selected, then game menu would load first. But once we build our game, okay, and we're not in Unity anymore, and we run our game separately from Unity, then the scene that's at index 0 is going to load first. Okay, so keep that in mind. So let's close that and press play. Oh, we forgot one more thing. Let's go back to our game menu script, and when we look at that, did we not make those public? We probably did not. Let's have a look at our script. Yep, we made them private. So we need to make them public so that we can access them in the inspector, so that we can actually assign those game objects to those properties. Okay, so alright, save that, go back into Unity, click on the game menu script in the hierarchy. Alright, so now they're there, they're not assigned, so we need to assign those. So 1 player text, 2 player text, and player selector. Alright, so now when we press play, press up, nothing happens, press down, chevron moves down. Up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. Okay, so that's perfect. And you see how the checkbox right here is selected when it's on one player, and it's not selected when it's on two player. So that way we'll be able to use that Boolean value later in the game when we decide to add two-player functionality, okay? We can use that because we've made that a public variable, right? So we're gonna go ahead and either way, one or two player, the game is gonna play the same. So let's go ahead and press enter. And then it goes right into our game, plays the intro music, but there's still an issue. What we need to do now is we need it to make our game wait for the intro song to finish playing before it allows anything else to happen. So since we're done with our game menu scene for now, we're going to go ahead and save that. Alright, so we're going to save scenes, save project, and go into our scenes folder and open up our level 1. And now that's really tiny, so we're going to have to zoom in on that quite a bit. Alright. So the first thing I want to do is I want to add the text here and here. Okay, if you've played Pac-Man, you'll notice that there's a text. And it says player up here, and the text at the bottom reads ready. So, and then what happens is as soon as the game loads, player ready appears here. The ghosts are now nowhere to be seen, and neither is Pac-Man. The intro music plays, and right before it gets down to, let's see, it gets down to about 2.25 seconds, and then the player text disappears. And then 2 seconds later, the ready text disappears. Or sorry, the player text disappears, the ghosts appear, Pac-Man appears, and then 2 seconds later, the ready text disappears. Then the actual game background music starts, and then the game commences. So that's where we need to get. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to also add a canvas to our game, to our level. So we're going to go game object UI canvas. All right, and same thing here. And you're probably asking yourself right now, how are we going to add that text so that it shows in the right spots? So the cool thing is when you're looking at the game view, the canvas basically encompasses your game view. Okay, so when you're looking at your scene view, you see this canvas and it's huge compared to what you're actually looking at in your scene. The camera focuses in on the canvas basically at the size that the canvas is. So the canvas is going to be the size of the camera view. This is going to adjust to be the size of the camera view. So that's basically how this works. So the one thing we've got to do still with our canvas is we have to change our scaling mode to scale with screen size, and then change our reference resolution to 1024 by 768. Alright. So now that we've got that, we can add our two text elements. But the best way to work in this is if you separate out your game and scene views so that you can see them both at the same time. Okay? Because now, when we're working with our canvas, we're going to easily be able to see where our UI elements are on the game. Okay? So let's go ahead and add a text object. Alright, so that text object is right here, and you can barely see it. But what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and change the font for that text object. Alright. And we're also going to change the size to 22. We're going to change the color to white. We're going to change the center for center, the alignment for center and center. And we're going to change the text to player. Alright, so now when we move this around, you'll see that if we need to put it right about here, which will put it into the perfect position that it needs to be in. Let's see what we've got here. 160 and 30, centered and centered, font size is 22, and we've got negative 105 for the X position. Well, that's interesting. Oh, never mind. Okay. So we're going to put it right about here. And you know what? Let's make the font just a little bigger. Let's go with like 26. Yeah, that looks better. Maybe even 27. Yep. Let's go with 27. Alright, so we're going to position that to where it looks like it's about centered. Okay. And we're going to change the color, actually not to white, but the player text is usually like sort of a bluish color. And then what we need to do is we need to just highlight that, duplicate it by pressing Command D. Then we're going to move it down. And we're going to change the text on this one to ready, with an exclamation mark. And we're going to change the color to sort of like an orangey color almost, like that. Alright, so now we've got these two text objects. Let's go ahead and name them appropriately. And we're going to name this one player text, and we're going to call this one ready text. So now when we start the game, we'll have these two things right here. Okay. So, interesting. Oh, here's the problem. I was like, why is anything moving? We're getting a null reference exception error, and that is because our array index is out of range, and that's because we've added additional elements to our hierarchy. And because if we look in our script, our game board script, when we go through and create our array, we are basically going over the entire board. Well, now see how we're like making sure that none of these are included? We need to make sure that the canvas, the player text, and the ready text game objects are not included as well. So let's go ahead and do that. We're going to say and o.name doesn't equal canvas, and o.name doesn't equal player text, and o.name doesn't equal ready text. Oops, quotes. Ready text. Okay. Alright, so now with that saved, we should be able to go back into Unity and click the play button. Alright, and we've got no errors. So we can actually play the game now. That annoying background sound. Oh, and we died. Alright, so now we've got no background music. That's wonderful. Okay, so the next part of this, what we actually need to do is we need to go back into our game board script, and we need to add some variables. So we also need to include the namespace, the UI namespace, so Unity Engine.ui. And then from here, we need to add two text elements, or two text properties. So we're going to do public text, player text, and public text ready text. All right. So before we get into more coding, let's go ahead and go back to Unity and actually assign those. So in our game object, we're going to drag player text into the player text property and ready text into the ready text property. All right. So now we're going to go back to our game board script, because now we've got some code to write. Okay, first thing, let's create a method called start game. Okay, And we're going to call this method from our start method. So we're going to go start game. All right. So the way that this is going to work is we've got the first waiting period is going to be 2.25 seconds, and the second waiting period is going to be 2 seconds. All right. In the first 2.25 seconds, before that actually starts, when the game first starts, the first thing we've got to do is we've got to hide our game object. So Pac-Man can't be visible, and the ghosts can't be visible either. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hide all that. So we're going to go here and copy all of that. Or you know what? I'm going to type it. I'm going to type it because I want to. So we're going to do game object. So first, let's put a comment, okay? Hide all ghosts. So game object O equals game object dot find game objects with tag. So we're getting all the ghosts. And then we're going to do a for each. And we're going to say game object ghost in O. And then here we're going to do ghost.transform.getComponent sprite renderer dot enabled equals false. So we're disabling our sprite renderer so that our ghosts are basically hidden. All right. And the other thing we've got to do is we've got to set that can move variable that we created last week or the week before to false. So we're going to do ghost transform get component ghost dot can move equals false. All right. So now we got to do the same thing for Pac-Man. So game object Pac-Man equals game object dot find game object dot find find Pac-Man, and then we're going to do Pac-Man dot transform dot get component sprite renderer dot enabled equals false, and also Pac-Man dot transform dot get component Pac-Man can move equals false. All right, so basically that's going to hide all the ghosts, it's going to hide Pac-Man, and it's going to keep them from being able to move. So then the next thing we've got to do is while everything is hidden, the background music's playing, we want to wait 2.25 seconds. So we've got to write a coroutine. So I enumerator start game after, or no, let's call it show objects after. And we're going to pass in a float parameter and we're going to call it delay. So now we can, at the end of our start game method, we can call that, we can call start coroutine, show objects after, and we're going to do 2.25f. And the reason that I know that it's 2.25f is because I've already done this and I've already figured out exactly what times we need to wait and move to the next function or method. So we're going to do, I'm going to scroll up a little bit. We're going to do yield return new wait for seconds, and we're going to do delay. All right. So from our start game method, we're going to hide the ghosts, we're going to hide Pac-Man, we're going to render them immobile, and then we're going to start a coroutine, and that's going to wait. The first thing it's going to do is wait for 2.25 seconds. And after 2.25 seconds, we are going to make Pac-Man and the ghosts visible. All right. So this time I am going to copy all of this, paste it into here, and instead of sprite render.enabled equals false, we're going to change that to true. We are not going to allow them to move just yet. And again here with Pac-Man, we're going to set his sprite renderer to enabled, so true. And we are also not going to allow him to move just yet. One more thing we've got to do is we've got to hide our player text. So we're going to say player text dot transform dot get component text dot enabled equals false. Okay, so that hides the player text game object. And then we need to create one more method, and that's going to be IEnumerator, and we're going to call this start game after. And the same thing, we're going to do float and delay. All right, and then at the end of this, we can call start coroutine, start game after, and that's just going to be 2 for 2 seconds. All right, so then all we've got to do is for the game to start is we have to allow Pac-Man and the ghosts to be able to move for now. We also need to start the background music. So let's copy this again. And we are going to change this, the sprite renderer. We're going to change this to ghost. And we're going to get rid of all that. And we're going to put dot can move equals true. And same thing for Pac-Man. Get rid of all this. Pac-Man. Oops. Yep. Dot can move equals true. Oh, and at the very beginning we forgot. We actually have to wait. Yield return new wait for seconds. And we're going to pass in delay. So we're going to wait for 2 seconds, and then we're going to allow Pac-Man and the ghost to move. And we have to hide our ready text. So ready text. Did I actually make that capital? Let's make that a lowercase r, because I'm OCD. Okay. So now back to ready text dot transform dot get component text dot enabled equals false. All right. So now we have everything that we need in order to start our game, right? So let's have a look and see what that looks like. Let's go to Unity and press play. So no ghosts, no Pac-Man. Player disappears. Ghost, Pac-Man appears. Ready. Ready. Ready was still there. Why didn't Ready disappear? All right. Ready text. Oh, you know what? I think it may have gotten unassigned. So let's go back to Unity. Yeah, it got unassigned because I changed the name. So we're gonna have to drag ready text back over. And let's press play. Perfect. All right. So now that that's working, we can go back into game board, and we also need to, at the end of all this, we need to start our background music. So transform dot get component audio source dot clip equals background audio normal, and then transform dot get component audio source audio source dot play. All right, now let's go back to Unity. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so now let's save that. Save scenes and save project. And now when we go to our other scene, our game menu scene, let's start with that. We can actually put this back so that we can get a whole view of our game. Alright, so now when we press play, we've got our game menu loaded. We can go 1 or 2 players, doesn't matter right now because we're not even doing anything with that. I just wanted to throw that up there. Press enter. Oh, where's the R? Okay. Well, I gotta fix another OCD thing. Let's go back to level 1. Player. It's probably because it's not wide enough. So let's change the width to 180. Okay, that's better. We'll have to do it on ready as well. Change the width to 180. There we go. Alright, save that. So, save scenes and save project. Go back to game menu. And I'm going to turn the volume down a little bit. It's just a little loud. Alright, so play. We're in our game menu. Press enter. No ghosts, no Pac-Man. Ghosts and Pac-Man. Ready disappears. Game starts. Okay. That's all perfectly timed. So now, let's wait and see what happens when Pac-Man is devoured by the ghosts. Because that's one more thing we've got to do. Alright, so realistically what should happen here is right after Pac-Man disappears, we need to show player, we need to show the player text and the ready text right after Pac-Man disappears. And then we need to wait 1 second, and then we need to hide the player text, and then we need to wait another second, and we need to hide the ready text, and then the game can resume. So instead of just being blank, we need to go ahead and make sure that that's right. So the way that we do that is we're going to go into, first of all, we're going to start with level 1 so that we don't have to go through the menu every time. And we're going to go into our scripts and go into the game board script. Alright. We're also going to go into the actual Pac-Man script and the Ghost script because we're going to make a couple changes. So one change we're going to make is we've got this restart method, and when we call the restart method from the game menu, it gets called after all of everything happens. Well, we need partially, some of these parts we need to happen before everything happens. I'll show you because what'll happen here, let's see. Let's go to game board. So we've got our start death, okay, so that starts the death, and then process death after, so we wait for 2 seconds, and then we disable the sprite renderer, okay, so we hide the ghost, and process death animation, and then we wait for 2 seconds, and we disable the sprite renderer for Pac-Man. And let's see here. Oops. We stop the audio. We wait for 1 second. Okay. And then we do a restart after 1 second. And that's because, actually no, that's wrong. We do a restart after 2 seconds. So what happens is when we call this process restart coroutine, in here is where we need to show the player ready text. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. So player ready, or player text dot transform dot get component text dot enabled equals true. Player text dot transform dot get component text enabled equals, I just wrote the same thing twice. So this is not going to be player text, this is going to be ready text. Okay. So let's see here. Pac-Man animation enabled true. So we're going to do the death animation. We're going to play the Pac-Man death sound and do the animation. So then right after the animation ends, we're going to hide Pac-Man. We're going to wait for 2 seconds. Yeah, we're going to stop the audio source. We're going to hide Pac-Man. Then we're going to wait for 2 seconds. We're also going to show the player text and ready text. Okay. So here's what that's going to look like. Alright, so let's let this ghost kill us. So we do the dying animation. Player ready. Alright, so now what we've got to do is we've got to make it so that after 1 second, player disappears, the ghosts show up, and then after 1 more second, ready disappears and the game resumes. So, in our game board script, the way that we do that is we're going to process death animation, but instead of waiting for 2 seconds, we're going to wait for 1 second. Okay? And after 1 second passes, instead of calling restart, we're going to call another coroutine, and we'll call this IEnumerator process restart show objects, and we're going to do float delay. Alright, and we're going to call this start coroutine process restart show objects, and we're going to wait 1 second. Alright, we're not going to call restart anymore from here. I'm going to call restart from here. And the first thing we want to do before we wait another second is we're going to hide player text. So player text .transform.getComponent text .enabled equals false. And we're going to call it yield return new wait for seconds delay. And then we're going to call restart. And in the restart, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to hide the ready text. So ready text .transform.getComponent text .enabled equals false. Okay. So what we're doing is we're cutting down. Okay. We used to wait 2 seconds, but now we have to wait 1 second so that we can disappear one of these. Okay. And sorry, here, 1 second, and disappear one of these, and then after that we wait another second, and then we restart the game. So let's see what that looks like. Let's save that and press start. We're gonna have to do some other things, and I'll show you. Come on, Pinky. There we go. Dying, ghost disappear, player ready. Ready. Okay. So what's supposed to happen is the ghosts and Pac-Man are supposed to show up right here. Okay, right before this last delay. The ghosts and Pac-Man are supposed to show up. So if we show the ghosts and Pac-Man, here's what's going to happen. I'm sure we've got that somewhere in here in our right here. Show objects after. So we're just going to copy that because it's going to be exactly what we would type. So all the way from game object up here to the word true down at the bottom. So copy, and then we're going to go down to here to process restart show objects. We're going to just go here in the middle and paste it, and that's when they show up. Alright, so the thing we've got to do now is we've got to go into the Pac-Man and the ghost, and we've got to change our restart. So let's say in Pac-Man, in the restart method, we've got transform.getComponent at spriteRenderer.enabled equals true. We don't need that anymore. And in the ghost, same thing. We're going to go to the restart method, and there's a transform.getComponent spriteRenderer.enabled equals true. All right, so let's go back into the game in Unity. Press start, and I'm going to show you what's going to happen. We're going to have to make another change, and that's because when Pac-Man dies, all we do is we hide the ghosts. We don't actually reposition them. So they're all hidden right now. Pac-Man died right here. So now everything is back to that. So what we've got to do is we've got to move them prior to them showing back up. Okay? Not in the restart method. So back in our game board, what we need to do is we need to go, let's see here, process, restart, show objects. So in our Pac-Man script, we need to create another method, and we're going to call this public void move to starting position. Alright, so that's for Pac-Man, and let's see here, get component animator, we should probably do that as well, so we'll do that, Control X, and we need to move him to the starting position, and we need to change his orientation and direction. So then all of what's left in the restart is just these things here, and that's fine. And we'll also call this change position method. Alright. So, same thing for the ghost. We're going to go in and right before the restart, public void move to starting position. We don't care about this one, we don't care about that, we care about this. And we care about, I'll just write these. If is in ghost house, direction equals vector2.up, else direction equals vector2.left, so that they'll actually look in the right direction. And then we need to add this part up here, and we also need to update our animator controller. Alright, so now all we've got left to do is we've got to go back to our game board, and in our process restart show objects method we have to call those two methods for Pac-Man and the ghosts. So we're going to go in here first in the for each loop. We're going to go ghost.transform.getComponent ghost and .move to starting position. And the same thing for Pac-Man. We're going to do Pac-Man.transform.getComponent Pac-Man.move to starting position. Alright. So now we should be good to go. Let's go ahead and save that, go back to Unity, and press play. Dying. Player ready. Ghost Pac-Man. Oh, Pac-Man was not happy. He was not happy where he was. Let's have a look here. So, for Pac-Man, got direction equals vector 2 dot left, orientation equals vector 2 dot left. Let's put this one back in here. Yeah, because we don't really need to change position because we don't have a next direction yet. Or we had a next direction, but it wasn't vector 2 dot left. So let's try that. Save and press play. Come on, Pinky. Ah, he got me. Alright, player ready? Pac-Man was still not right. Why is he not turning correctly? The Pac-Man is definitely confused about what direction he should be facing. So we should not enable his animator. We should just make sure that the chomp animation is the one that's selected. So let's see where we're at. Save that, press play. Ah. Pac-Man, what are you doing? Alright guys, give me a second. I'll be right back and I'm gonna figure out what's going on here. Alright, so let's try one more thing here. And that is to go back to our game board, or sorry, not game board, but Pac-Man. And we're gonna take this and put it back in our restart. And also transform that get component animator enabled equals true. And save and go to Unity. Come on, Pinky. Thank you. Alright. And oh, come on. Alright, what else is there? Alright, so when I wrote this, I actually put in the game board, I added these. Oh, wait. Did I take them out? I did. Okay, so interesting. Okay. So let's save that and go back to game board, and here for Pac-Man, going to add these in. I'm going to do Pac-Man.transform, of course, and Pac-Man.transform, and we will finally Pac-Man.transform.getComponent Pac-Man dot jump animation. Let's try again. Oh, Pinky got me again. And he's still reversed. Why is he still reversed? Okay, so I figured it out, and it was a stupid thing that I just wasn't paying attention. One thing I do want to do is I want to move these back to the Pac-Man script, because what'll happen is the animator will start running, and there'll still be 1 second of waiting before Pac-Man can actually move, but it'll also already be making the chomp animation, that already starts, so we don't want that. So we're going to cut that out, save, and go into our Pac-Man script, and make sure that we add that into the restart, okay? And, well, we need to get rid of Pac-Man here. And this can just be chomp animation. Alright. So, we need to call a method called update orientation. There we go. That's all it is. So let's click play, and we should be okay. Come on, Pinky. Whoa. Okay. Well, what's going on now? We've got that. Sprite render is enabled. And move to starting position. We've got, we've still got this here. So let's get rid of that. So all that should be in move to starting position is transform.position equals starting position.transform.position. We need to set our direction and our orientation, and then we need to update our orientation. And then we set can move equals to true, current node equals starting position. Yes, and next direction equals vector 2 at left. Transform.getComponent. Alright, so save that, see what happens. Oh, it's not liking me right now. Okay. Back to game board. Alright, so in our game board, here's what we should have. We should have this, which removes the text. Then we've got the ghosts, they show. Now we've got game object, Pac-Man, game object find Pac-Man. Then we've got Pac-Man transform game object, animator. No, we're not going to enable the animator. We're going to enable the sprite renderer, and then we're going to move Pac-Man to the starting position. We're going to wait 1 second. We're going to remove that. We're going to start the game. We're going to restart Pac-Man. And the restart method, we should have can move equals true, current node equals starting position. We need to have change direction. change position and direction. I don't know why I deleted that. Let's see if that works. Alright, so that fixed one thing, but not everything. The animation showed his dying animation again right when Pac-Man is shown. So, when Pac-Man shows up from the game board, Pac-Man here, we enable the sprite renderer. So we're showing Pac-Man, and what he was currently doing was running his animation. So we need to disable his animator component. So Pac-Man transform dot get component animator dot enabled equals false, or no. Yes. Let's try that. And the survey says no. One more thing we've got to do. There's always one more thing. Alright, so when we move Pac-Man to the starting position, we're gonna set his idle sprite since we are disabling the animator, okay? So we're gonna do transform.get component sprite renderer dot sprite equals idle sprite. Alright, now that should make everything be perfect. So we'll have a look. Come on, Pinky, come get me. Oh. And we are good. Yes. Perfect. Alright, so now let's save everything. Save scenes. Save project. And go into our scenes folder. Open up our game menu. And let's start it all the way from the beginning. Alright, so play. Now we've got 1 or 2 players. Even though it doesn't matter which one we pick. Let's pick 2 players. Press enter. Game starts. Intro. Player ready. Ghosts show up. Pac-Man's ready. Let's eat some ghosts. Come on, Pinky. And... oh, they got us. See, now isn't that awesome? So much better. The game looks so much cooler now. Don't get me. I'm going to get you. Yeah, the game is definitely much cooler now. Ah. Alright, so in the next tutorial, what we're probably going to do is we're going to get into more of the UI. We've already got a lot of the UI done, but in the next tutorial, we are going to make it so that when Pac-Man consumes a ghost, it's going to make a sound. It's going to pause for a second. It's going to show you your score, and then it's going to go into where the ghost like actually escapes, tries to go back to the ghost house and regenerate. So that is it for this tutorial. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. Comments go down below. Yeah, any questions, comments, that's where they go. And don't forget to subscribe. One more thing, I have a shout out for a subscriber. His name is Mark O'Keefe. Thank you, Mark, for pledging on Patreon. I appreciate it very much. I'm going to continue doing these tutorials, and hope you guys enjoy them. See you guys next week.